I want you to picture two tomato plants standing side by side in the same garden bed. Same seed packet, opened the same morning, same soil, the same shovel full of it, mixed in the same wheelbarrow, started on the same day, watered from the same can, given the same sun off the same eastern sky, and yet one of them stands near twice as tall as the other. It is dark green and thick through the stem, stout as a young fence post, already setting little green tomatoes along the branches. And its twin, its very brother from the same packet, sits there small and pale and bare, leaves a little yellow at the edge, not a flower on it. You stand over those two plants, with the watering can in your hand, and something in you sinks a little because you did everything the same. You followed the directions on the back of the seed packet. You bought the good potting mix. You may have even bought a bag of the blue powder and sprinkled it on like the picture said. And still, one plant thrives, and one plant just sits there and shames you. Now a man looks at that, and he tells himself one of them got lucky, or one of them got sick, or maybe the runt was just a bad seed. And I am here to tell you it was not luck, and it was not sickness, and it was not a bad seed. The strong plant got fed something the weak plant never did, and the thing it got fed cost you almost nothing. It is not your fault that you did not know. Nobody sat you down and told you, because the people who sell you the bag of blue powder have no reason on this earth to tell you. So, I want you to sit with this for a moment, because it is going to change the way you garden for the rest of your life. There is a tonic you can stir up in your own kitchen in about 5 minutes of work, and one night of waiting out of 4 things you very likely already have in your pantry right now. It costs you maybe a dime a gallon. And it does for a tomato plant what a whole $12 bag of garden store fertilizer cannot do, because it does not do the same thing at all. The bag feeds the plant. This tonic feeds the ground. And by the time I am done, you are going to understand the difference so plain that you will not be able to look at that blue powder the same way again. I am a farmer from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And I am going to be honest with you the way I always am. My family came over from the Palatinate in Germany in 1838, and we have grown tomatoes in this same patch of Lancaster County ground every single summer since. That is near 200 years of tomatoes off one piece of dirt. And that dirt is richer now than it was when my great-grandfather first turned it. That did not happen by accident. And it did not happen out of a bag. A neighbor of mine, a fellow down the road, watched this tonic work 2 summers ago. He laughed at me and called it my magic elixir. I told him there is no magic in it, only old sense. But I will admit to you plainly, when you see the 2 plants standing side by side, it does look a little like magic. So today I am going to show you exactly how to make it, exactly how to use it. And most important of all, I am going to show you why it works, so that you are not just trusting me, an old man on a screen, but you are understanding the thing for yourself. Now, before I go one step further, I will say this once, and then I will let it be. The old methods my family uses, there is far more of it than ever fits in one video, and I have gathered the whole of it into a written collection. That collection is the long version, the whole shelf of it. If you ever want it, it is there. I will not bring it up again. This information is free, and it is enough to grow you a fine tomato. Let me start with the one thing that turns this whole matter around, because once you truly see it, you garden different forever. Here it is. You are not feeding the plant. You are feeding the soil, and the soil feeds the plant. That is the whole secret, and almost every gardener I have ever met has it exactly backward. Folks think a fertilizer is food you hand straight to the plant the way you set a plate down in front of a hungry child. So they buy a powder that dumps salt and nitrogen right down at the roots, and the plant gulps it up and shoots up fast and green and tall. But it shoots up weak. It is a soft, fast, watery kind of growth, the kind that bends in a storm and tempts every bug in the county. My grandfather would have shaken his head at that. He taught me when I was a boy that the ground is alive. There is a whole hidden world down there under your boots. Little living things, beyond all counting. More of them in one handful of good earth than there are people on the whole earth. And they are the ones, those little living things, that actually carry the food to the root. They unlock what is already locked up in your dirt, minerals that have been sitting right there the whole time, and they hand it to the plant in a form the plant can finally use. A tired, lifeless soil has too few of these little workers, and so the plant starves to death, standing in good ground, surrounded by food it cannot reach. Think on that. The food is right there, and the plant cannot get to it because the living bridge between the dirt and the root has died off. So you do not need to force-feed the plant. You need to wake up the living soil underneath it, and then the soil does the feeding, the way the good Lord set it up to work in the first place. This tonic, then, is not really plant food at all. It is food for the life in the soil. You feed them, they multiply by the millions, and they turn around and feed your tomato. That is the reason a few cups of this can do what a whole heavy bag of powder cannot. The powder feeds one meal. The tonic builds a kitchen. Now, let me give you the parts list before we mix a thing. And I want you to notice the total as we go. You need 4 things and some water. And the whole gallon will cost you somewhere between 5 and 15 cents, depending on what you already have on the shelf. First, yeast. Plain baking yeast, the same kind you would use for bread. A live sourdough starter works just as well. Any live yeast works, and you need about 1 tablespoon. The yeast is the heart of the whole thing, and I will tell you exactly why in a minute. A little packet from the grocery store is maybe a quarter, and it makes several batches. Second, molasses, about 2 tablespoons. If you have no molasses, plain white sugar will do the same job in the same amount, though I would steer you to the molasses if you have it, because molasses carries minerals along with it that the bare sugar does not. A few pennies, either way. Third, if you have it, about 1 cup of buttermilk. Now, this one is not strictly needful, so do not fret if your jug is empty, but it earns its place at the table, and I will tell you how in a minute. And fourth, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, no more than that. That 1 teaspoon matters, and too much of it undoes the whole batch, so mind it. And then the water, 1 gallon of it, and the water matters far more than most folks ever think. You want it lukewarm, blood warm, about the warmth of bath water you would set a baby in, not hot. Hot water kills the yeast dead before it ever starts. And then you have made a gallon of nothing. And it must be clean water with no chlorine in it. Now, here is a thing worth sitting with. Chlorine is put into town water for the express purpose of killing little living things, the germs in the pipe. And that is a fine thing for your drinking glass. But that is precisely the opposite of what we are trying to do here. We are trying to grow little living things, not slaughter them. So this is where I go to my rain barrel. I catch the rain off the barn roof into a barrel, and it is free and it is clean, and there is nothing in it to harm the very life we are working to grow. It is the same water the good Lord sends down out of the sky for nothing, while the world would gladly sell it back to you in a plastic jug. If you have caught no rain, then let your tap water sit out in an open bucket overnight, so the chlorine lifts off into the air on its own. or use a little spring water for a small batch. But do not skip this part. The chlorinated tap water straight from the spigot will fight you the whole way. Now, I will tell it slow because here is the step everyone is too impatient for. And that impatience is the single biggest reason a batch ever fails. You wake the yeast up first. You do not just dump everything in a bucket and stir it and walk away. Take your warm water, stir in the molasses or the sugar until it is fully dissolved, and then sprinkle the yeast across the top of it like you were salting a field. Do not stir it in. Just lay it on the surface so it can spread out and breathe. And then you wait. Give it a couple of hours at the very least. But the first time you ever do this, I want you to leave it overnight. And when you come back in the morning, here is what you are looking for. You want to see a foam on the top. A tan bubbly froth, like the head on a glass of root beer. That froth is the yeast come alive and feeding and breathing. If you see that foam, your tonic is alive, and it is going to work. If you come back and you see nothing, flat and still, then your yeast was dead in the packet, and you start over with fresh yeast. And it is far better to learn that lesson from a quiet bucket than from a dead seedling 3 weeks down the road. That overnight wait is the whole entire difference between a tonic that works and a jar of plain sugar water. Do not rush it. Once it is foaming good, now you stir in your buttermilk if you are using it. And then, last of all, very last, the 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and your gallon is made. Now, let me tell you what each of those 4 things is actually doing down in their plane, because you ought to understand it, and not just follow an old man blind. The yeast is the main worker, the foreman of the whole crew. It is a living thing, and when it feeds on that sugar, it multiplies fast. And as it does, it stirs the whole soil to life. It wakes up the good bacteria and the helpful fungus that are already down there sleeping. And it feeds them, and it speeds the rotting of the old dead matter in the ground into food a root can take up. And it helps unlock the nutrients already sitting locked in your soil that the plant simply could not reach on its own. That is the very heart of it. The molasses is the food that keeps that new life going once it is started. And because molasses carries its own iron and potash, and a little magnesium and calcium besides, it feeds longer and richer than the plain sugar would. The buttermilk, if you used it, brings calcium. And calcium is the one thing a tomato is forever short of. You ever see a tomato go black and sunken and leathery on the bottom end? That ugly rot that ruins half your crop just as it ripens? That is calcium the fruit never got. The buttermilk helps head that off, and it strengthens the cell walls of the fruit besides. And that 1 spoonful of baking soda gently settles the sourness right at the soil surface and makes it a less friendly place for the molds and the blights that plague a tomato every wet summer. Every one of the 4 has a job. None of them is in there by accident. Now, how to use it. And here is where careless folks do real harm. So, I want you to listen close. There are 3 rules, and you break them at your plant's peril. First, never pour it on dry ground straight at the stem. Water your garden lightly first, just plain water, so the soil is damp going in. Pouring a strong living brew onto bone-dry roots can shock the plant. Damp the ground first, always. Second, you pour it on the soil around the plant, not on the leaves, and not right up against the stem. You pour it out a few inches from the stem in a ring where the little feeding roots are reaching out. So, the life grows out into the soil and the roots grow toward it to meet it. On the leaves, it does no good, and it can invite trouble. Third, and this is the one a man's own pride trips him on every time. Do not overdo it. You will be tempted. You will stand there and think, well, If 1 tablespoon of yeast is good, then surely 3 is better. And you will pour it on heavy, hoping to double the magic. Do not. Too much, and you throw the whole soil out of balance. The microbes crowd and fight and compete, and you end up with a plant that is all leaf and no fruit, big and bushy and green, and giving you not one thing to eat. The old measure is the right measure. For a little seedling, just a few drops near each one, twice a week. For a young plant in a pot, about 1/4 cup. For a grown plant out in the ground, up to a full cup once or twice a week, and no more than that. You still water it normal the rest of the time. This is a tonic, mind. It is not the everyday drink. Before I go on to the rest, let me pause for just a moment. If you're the kind of person who wants to lower your bills and waste less and grow more of your own food and run a steadier, more independent home, we have a community where we share all of this season by season, and you can ask questions whenever you get stuck. It costs nothing to come sit at the table with us. Now, I want to give you the honest math, plain, so you see the whole shape of it. A decent bag of tomato fertilizer at the garden store runs you somewhere from $8 to $15, and you buy it again every single spring, year after year, because the powder runs out, and the soil it left behind is hungrier than the year before. Call it $10 a year, low, just for a couple of tomato plants. This tonic, a full gallon of it, costs you between 5 and 15 cents to make. And 1 gallon feeds a small garden for weeks. Say you spend $1 a season on yeast and molasses. And that is generous. So over 10 years of growing, the bag cost you $100 and leaves your dirt poorer. And the tonic cost you $10 and leaves your dirt richer every single season. That is honest. I will not stand here and promise you that your plant will triple by Tuesday, because every garden and every soil is its own creature. And a man who promises you a miracle by the calendar is a man selling you something. But I will tell you plain, feed the soil this way, and your plants come on stronger and bear better than the ones you leave to fend for themselves. And it works the very same way for your cucumbers and your squash and your peppers and your beans, the whole garden, not the tomatoes only. And here is what this tonic does not do, so you are not disappointed. It is not a cure for a plant that is already half dead from blight or root rot. It will not fix bad drainage or a spot that gets only 2 hours of sun. It will not make up for never weeding. It is not a poison, so it will not kill a bug for you. And it works slow, and it works low down where the life is. You will not see a thing the first day. You will see greener leaves first within a week or so, then thicker stems and more branching. Then the flowers come, and the flowers are the tomatoes coming. It is patient work. The ground keeps its own time. Now, let me tell you plainly who profits from you not knowing that a tablespoon of yeast would do this. Not to rile you up, just so you see the shape of the thing, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. There is no money in yeast and molasses and caught rainwater. None. You already own them, or near enough. But there is a great deal of money in a bright bag of blue powder with a picture of a giant tomato printed on the front, sold to you every single spring, season after season after season. And here's the part that ought to make you sit up. That fast salty powder feeds the plant directly and bypasses the soil life entirely. And over the years, it can leave your soil more lifeless and more dependent than it found it, which means you must buy more powder next year just to make up for the ground you killed last year. Do you see it? A tonic that builds your soil richer every season makes you need less help as the years go by. A powder that feeds the plant and starves the ground, makes you need more. One of those two is a far better business, and it is plainly not the one that helps your garden. Now, I am not going to stand here in my kitchen and tell you that a man schemed this up in a back room somewhere, plotting against your tomatoes. No one had to. It is worse than a conspiracy in a way, and stranger because it is a system that nobody had to sit down at a table and arrange. It simply pays better to sell a plant food that leaves the soil hungry than to teach a man to feed his own soil for free. The bright bag has all the money in the world behind it, and the quiet old tonic has none. So the quiet old tonic just sits there in farmhouses like mine and does not get printed on any package. That is the whole of it, not a plot. Just who has a reason to teach you and who has every reason not to. So here is what I want you to do this week. It is small, and you can start tonight. First, tonight before bed, set out a bucket of tap water to sit open overnight, or set a barrel under your downspout to catch the next rain. Second, find your yeast and your molasses in the pantry, or pick up a packet next time you are at the store. Third, this weekend, mix 1 gallon by the recipe, warm water and molasses, and the yeast sprinkled on top, and let it foam overnight, and look for that tan froth in the morning so you know it is alive. Then damp your ground and pour it in a ring around just 2 of your plants. Leave the rest unfed so you have your own 2 plants side by side, your own little proof. In 3 weeks, you will know, and then come back and tell me what you saw. I ask you honest, because I have learned the whole country from these comments. Tell me down below what you are growing this year, and tell me whether you have ever fed your soil instead of your plant before, and tell me what county you live in, and what your dirt is like, sand or clay or good black loam, because this tonic does the very most good in the tiredest, poorest soil. I read every single one. The little family methods like this one are exactly the kind of inherited knowledge that gets lost forever when nobody writes it down. And these comments are how we save them. Next time I want to show you how we make compost that never stinks, because most folks' compost pile turns into a sour, slimy, reeking mess that draws every fly in the township. And the old people made sweet-smelling black earth out of the very same kitchen scraps, with one thing the modern pile is always missing. And that is where the life in this very tonic ought to come from in the end. Your own ground made rich by your own hand. It is the natural next step after today. A garden is not a thing you force, friends. It is a thing you feed low down where the life is. And then you stand back, and you let it do what it was made to do. My grandfather never bought a bag of plant food in his whole long life, and his tomatoes were the envy of the whole township, because he understood that the secret was never in the plant. It was always in the ground beneath it. The garden that feeds a family year after year is the garden whose soil remembers how to live. The people who built this country with their hands knew that, and we are only just starting to remember it. The Lord bless you and keep you, and I will see you next time, if we are spared and willing. If this ancient wisdom changes the way you look at the soil in your garden, please subscribe and like this channel. We are unearthing the heritage that the modern world has tried to bury. Let us plant a better future together. The next secret from the earth will be revealed soon.